Welcome to the Executive Coaching Series, a space for bold conversations about leadership, coaching, and the culture required to build organizations that actually work.
Well, welcome everybody listening today, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sharon Lawton. I'm an executive leadership coach working specifically with female leaders on leadership identity within organizations and creating sustainable coaching cultures. But I have a love and a passion of connecting with wonderful people in the coaching industry and specifically talking about the topics that we're going to be looking at today, specifically around navigating AI disruption, psychological safety, and shifting demands on leaders themselves. So I have the pleasure of hosting today's panel. I'm part of the Zalenta community, and let's get started. So leadership right now for me, I think, feels more complex than ever, certainly in the organizations that I've been working alongside and also my one-to-one clients. Leaders are navigating rapid technological change, including the rise of AI, alongside increasing expectations around performance, well-being, and how they show up for their people, that leadership presence. Now, I've also noticed that there's a growing focus on psychological safety, not just a concept, but as something leaders are expected to actively create within their teams. There's a lot of noise about it, but I'm going to get from our guests today a little bit more around what that actually means. And alongside all of this, the demands on executives continue to shift. So for me, this raises some important questions. What do leaders actually need right now? What do they need support with right now? What are organizations really valuing when they invest in coaching? How is the role of coaching in these changing demands? And in my 18 of changes, it's been fascinating, and never have I seen actually now the biggest shift that we are going to be looking at exploring today. Now, I'm pleased to be joined by three fantastic panelists. I have with me Jenny Garrett, who's an executive coach and leadership specialist. She's known specifically for her work supporting inclusive leadership and helping organizations to develop diverse leadership pipelines. I also have Naomi Franchetti with me, a leadership and transformational expert with deep experience in program delivery, change, and supporting leaders through complex organizational environments. She's also the director of coaching for Arbinger Institute in the US. And Lauren Herring, a leadership coach and the CEO of Impact Leadership, focusing on helping leaders build resilience, well-being, and high-performing coaches. Welcome, ladies. I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Fantastic. Now, each of you will be bringing a unique perspective from your own perspective in working alongside organisations and leaders, and also your backgrounds and experience. And I've really only given a very light snapshot of your backgrounds and experience, but I really think that each of you bringing your own perspectives is going to make a really rich and relevant conversation. So let's dive in. So I really want to maximize our time together. And I want to start with AI. AI is sort of, everybody seems to be talking about it at the moment. And it's often positioned as a way to increase productivity and performance. I think certainly what I've seen, potentially there could be a risk that it's actually increasing pressures on leaders rather than reducing it. And I'd be really interested to hear how you're actually seeing that today. I'm going to come first of all to you, Naomi, and just find out from what your perspective is on how you see things.
Okay, well, you asked how it's changed. I don't have nearly the vast experience as these wonderful ladies, Lauren and Jenny, but I would say, before we started talking about this, before we started hit record, that the shift that we're seeing is AI is coming up in so frequently in conversations that we have with our coaching clients right now. You know, how do we maintain our humanity while bringing all this technology in at the same time? And then there's a little fear associated with it. I'm sure you guys probably see this. There's a change in identity when you're no longer the best at what you do, when technology can do the things that you used to be able to do so easily. So there's that fear. And then am I still going to have a job? I might be training the AI that will replace me someday. And so how do we support our team with all of these unknowns that are unprecedented, really, that we've never seen before, because change is growing so fast. So I would love to hear what these other ladies are seeing too, because I mean, that's just a snapshot if I had to summarize.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really nice to sort of start us off with just your perspective on that. Jenny, can I come to you? What are you seeing now in terms of how AI is really impacting leaders day to day?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Naomi brought to the table. I think that is a challenge. I also think that AI it's a bit addictive in a way, and it's with you, when you're going for a walk, when you're sleeping, when you're working, and the natural pauses for reflection aren't there. So this question about where do new ideas come from is being replaced with this constant productivity. And I think that's something people are coming to. The AI is putting a cognitive load on people that can really damage your well-being. It's a real challenge. And so they have to deal with that lack of time off, that lack of separation between elements of their life before they can actually get into the leadership problem that they might want to deal with. So it's like there needs to be a bit of a step back before they're able to go forward, and we have to make space for that for them to be able to process it.
Thank you, Jenny. Where are you seeing that sort of coming up in the areas that you're working specifically, Lauren?
Well, I think what leaders are experiencing is this incredible pressure to gain productivity through AI. And so by being able to put in a prompt and have it write you an email that would have otherwise taken you 20 minutes, or to put a business case together that would have otherwise taken you a whole day, now the expectation is, hey, you just did that in 5 minutes or 15 minutes with a little bit of tweaking and prompting. What else are you going to do for me now? And so from the perspective of, yes, it's saving time, and yes, there's a huge productivity shift, but now it's like, okay, what are you going to do with that newfound productivity? And oh, by the way, we're likely going to be cutting some headcount, and your team's going to be smaller, and you have to be strategic and tactical now through getting all this done. And if you bring in the points that Jenny brought about the ability to absorb and reflect, the goals these days we're hearing from organizations and from leaders is, I need to make decisions quickly, but it's so challenging when AI, I'm needing to move at the pace of AI now.
So sticking with you, Lauren, I'd be quite interested in really exploring with you, and then I'll come to both Naomi and Jenny too, is if we bring coaching into the equation now, how are you seeing AI disruption changing what leaders are asking or needing from coaching itself?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I think that's still really evolving. What we know at Impact Group, based on some design thinking work that we've done over the years, is that the number one thing that people value about their coaching engagement and their coaching program is the relationship with the coach. And the value that people get out of a relationship where there's a give and a take. I'm not going to tell you that you can't come to ahas through virtual coaching and through through maybe some AI activities, because the AI can actually ask really good questions. But the thing that I would question about how deeply you want to embed this in the organization in terms of a true lever of development is from the accountability perspective. You know, when people have a relationship with a coach, there's a sense of obligation. I need to show up for that meeting, or I need to do my homework so that I can keep progressing. I
Yeah.
think a big problem with relying purely on AI for coaching is that accountability piece that stems from relationship, and you know, especially, you know, in this tech forward world that we're in, I think we're all just thirsty for deeper connection and connection with humans. And so, yes, I think there is an opportunity for AI to play an important role in coaching. It can accelerate certain behaviors, it can accelerate some ahas, but it can't replace the full value of what a true human coach can do.
Love that. Love that. And Noe, I can see how much that resonated with you whilst Lauren was talking. What would you sort of add to that?
I love what Lauren was saying, and I agree on the accountability piece. I will say this though. Okay, I got OpenClaw as my accountability partner in my via Telegram, right? And I love it. Keeps me on track, keeps me going with my fitness goals. However, nervous system regulation, you know, or to Jenny's, the space to just be present. And when you have a million different inputs from AI that is much faster than you, that is working 24/7, you need to take a step back and you need a person to co-regulate with you. I deeply believe that we were meant to be together. We were meant to be in relation with each other. And I think if we expect AI to take the place, then we will be sorely behind and our nervous system will be constantly activated. I really, truly believe that. And I think that that's the missing piece. But we're seeing it already. People are burnt out. They're overwhelmed, at least some of the inputs that I have. And I see you guys shaking your head. So you know that's exactly what's happening. So what this is going to be like a strategic imperative in my mind, where we actually need to put the time aside and the money aside for coaching to help the people that remain after whatever other AI revolution or technology revolution changes the way we work.
Yeah, 100% in alignment. And you know, when you said about nervous system regulation, I actually physically connected that. I felt a real physiological connection with that when you said that. So we know it's true. So we really need to be listening to what we know is so important where that's concerned. Jenny, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think the big thing I experienced myself. So people were saying AI is going to take coaching. There's AI coaches everywhere. And I thought, how can I engage in this and try and understand it myself? So I downloaded an app which was around AI journaling. And you journal every day. And at the end of the week, it feeds back to you. I did it the first week and it said, Jenny, you're amazing. You're juggling so much. You know, aren't you doing well? I did it the second week. I was amazing again. I did it third week. I was amazing. And then I started questioning it. I was like, I know I'm not amazing. I'm imperfect. You know, there's lots you don't know about me. And I think that is the big challenge. You will come to a real life human coach because they're not going to agree with everything you say. They're going to challenge you. They're going to push back. They're going to bring a different perspective. And that's what we really need. It's wonderful to be told you're fantastic. And of course, affirmation can be part of the coaching process, but it needs to be well-rounded. So, you know, I think that real human coaches will give you that challenge that you'll miss. What else comes to me is that people are now talking about intellectual decay, leaders leaning in so heavily on AI for expertise that they're forgetting their own skills. And I think, again, that's something people can bring back to coaching, recognizing actually what is that balance between me relying so heavily on AI and me bringing my expertise to the table. How do I hold on to it? How do I harness it? And how do I keep trusting it, in light of a tool that keeps telling me in such convincing language that it's correct and it knows everything. And I think the last thing that people keep bringing up is actually critical thinking skills is something that we need to keep alive. And if AI is quietly doing the thinking for all of us, how do we do it? I think the coaching conversation can be a really good place to keep challenging ourselves, developing that critical thinking, having space for it. Ultimately, most people that we meet are using AI in some shape or form. If you're a coach who tries to eliminate AI from the conversation, I think you're making a mistake, because it's in the room already. They may have even said to a large language model, what shall I bring to my coaching session today? But they would have probably also tried to solve some of their challenges using AI as well. So we need to think about how we potentially bring AI into the conversation without relying on AI, and actually helping leaders to remember that they can trust their instincts, their gut, their intuition as well.
Love that. And what came to mind when you were talking about that, Jenny, it's about amplifying what human beings do well rather than replacing, so it frees leaders up, it frees us up as coaches to do what we do well, and the stuff that we can outsource to AI, then we can do that too in order to perform better. Wonderful. Well, I could stick on this topic for the whole of the session, but I am, with respect, just going to move on and talk about psychological safety and psychological safety in practice, because it's a word that's talked about a lot in organisations, certainly in my experience, and most leaders would say it's something that they really value. Most organisations will say it's something that is something they absolutely value. What I'm wondering is if we're at risk of becoming a little bit more of a sort of a narrative rather than a reality. So what I'd like to explore with you all is where we see organisations saying they prioritise psychological safety, but perhaps in practice something very different is happening. So, Jenny, I'm going to come back to you, if that's okay. What do you think about the risk of it becoming more of a narrative than a reality?
Yeah, I think organizations and people generally buy into the idea of psychological safety, the idea that people should be able to speak up, share their perspective, without consequence, without adverse consequence. That's when you know you're safe. Yeah, that I can tell you what I think respectfully, of course, and I won't worry that I'm going to be walked out of the building or missed, looked over from the, because of the next promotion. So we can buy into it, but if you haven't done the personal work in advance of saying that you're creating a psychologically safe environment, there's a problem, because the first time someone says, "Oh, I've experienced a microaggression from you," or "When you did that, I didn't feel appreciated," or "Actually, I think you might have some favoritism for someone else," you end up being defensive, or you end up maybe bursting into tears. You haven't done the inner work to really listen and to acknowledge someone else's perspective. And so what I think happens, I think people positively do want to engage with psychological safety. I really do. But I think if they haven't done the work on themselves to understand what does that really mean in them as a leader, what does it really mean? What are the behaviors that I need to exhibit? How do I need to show up? How do I need to show people that they're listening to? And I think in the world we're living in right now, for me, it goes hand in hand with trust. And this idea of AI is that lots of people think layers of the workplace are going to be removed. The transparency around that will create psychological safety. But if you say, teach the AI how to do your job, and your job will be fine when it really won't, then people don't feel safe. So really being open, transparent, respectful, and being open to feedback is what it means to be psychologically safe. And people have to do the work. It's not something you can just say. You have to do the work on the people so that they can create that environment. So that's how I feel about it.
Wonderful, thank you. That's really, really, really helpful. Certainly in my experience, and I sort of see this sort of coming up when I'm working with organisations that perhaps are using McKinsey's organisational health index survey, where there's a lot being spoken about that, and they're all very aware of Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety, but it's just words, and actually, in the scheme of things, maybe something very, very different is happening. Naomi, can I ask what the organisations that you're working with? Where do you see? I mean, obviously not naming specific organisations, but talking in general terms. Where do you see organisations saying they prioritise psychological safety, but perhaps in practice something very different is happening?
Yeah, I don't want, I should say, it's hard for me to necessarily say that I see it all the time, but I
Yeah,
always like to think of it in terms of how do they handle failure? And this does go with Amy Edmondson's work, and this does go hand in hand with how are we experimenting right now with AI to make sure we're the most effective that we are. And so she has a whole spectrum of reasons for failure. If you've read her book, her last one especially, praiseworthy versus blameworthy behaviors. And so when I think about psychological safety, about letting people speak up or being heard, and I think about how do we handle failures in an organization? What does it look like when the AI deletes your whole database and you're responsible for it now? How do we handle that? How do we handle that? And what is the risk that is involved when we are turning part of our workload over to AI? And this is something that I've been thinking about a lot because it's important that we incorporate it. It's just, I talked about strategic imperatives earlier, but this is one of them. And we all agree before the podcast, it's like the push to incorporate AI is greater than it's ever been before. And it feels more urgent than it's ever been before. And I think if we really want people to adopt this, we have to create the conditions, the psychological safety for people to be able to try things, be able to try the AI, maybe even fail, and set them up in a way that even if they do fail, that we're not necessarily going to hammer them because we say we have psychological safety. So that's our express value, but then that's the rhetoric. But the reality is, it's not an option. And I think that's the danger. Not necessarily that I see it in practice, but I think that is the danger that exists right now.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I love that. And Lauren, from your perspective at Impact, where are you sort of seeing things from your perspective, your organisation's perspective? For me, this is the reality of where leadership really shows up, or where organisations are really true to their values or not. But I'm really interested to hear your perspective.
Yeah, so at Impact Group, we recently did a survey of HR executives and C-suite executives on the needs for how to support teams and leaders in adopting AI. And what we found was that about 50% of the HR and C-suite executives are what we would call an AI realist. They know there's value in it, and they know there's an opportunity here. But like there's still not a lot of clarity around, okay, what exactly do I do to operationalize this and to enable this across my team? Only about 10% of leadership, senior leaders, are what we would call the AI operators, where they really know their way around AI beyond just the simple prompts. And so I think the challenge right now is there's an imperative, like Naomi was talking about. We have to use it. We have to implement this. But there's also an imperative to implement it beyond prompting, because like it's one thing to say, yeah, write this email for me. But it's another thing to say, after every sales meeting I have, immediately put everything in Salesforce and then write my email for me to follow up so I can then review it and have it automatically sent. The agentic component is what the corporations are really looking for. But I think most leaders across the organization are looking to both sides of them saying, how in the world do I do this? And so, when we talk about the uncertainty that around jobs and where's, if all of these things are automated now, where does the frontline or mid-level jobs go? So, the safety component around that element added to this insecurity of how do I even do this, because I don't have the tools and the insights. And so I really think we need to do more to walk alongside people in this journey. And I think the challenge is, who do you get to walk alongside? Do you get the young people who actually do kind of understand some of these models? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I really don't have that insight. I would say certainly the senior leaders don't have the insight on how to write agents within, some of these things, even though they might actually be able to if they were just taught a few things, because it is so simple. I was actually playing with this last night at home, and my husband thought I was being ridiculous, but I'm like, I can't put this in the hands of a small few people in my organization. I need to be able to get my hands dirty with it so that I can come support, because what I'm finding even at Impact Group is there's a strong desire. If we're talking about 50% of people are AI realists, the recognition of the opportunity and the growth is there. But I think there's a big gap in capability, and it's both the, how do I support my team through the change of this, as well as the technical skills to make some of these things happen, and the governance, like understanding what's the governance around this within an organization, to say like, okay, you want to do all this, but you can't touch anything. You don't have the authority to do this. So then now your hands are tied. And so you're sitting here like, you want me to do this, but I can't do anything. So now I don't feel very safe in this environment. I don't feel like you're being authentic and honest with me. So I think it's coming from a lot of different directions. It's the uncertainty around how to best use the tools. It's the uncertainty around the job. And then certainly one of the biggest components, as we all know, is the change management around it.
Yeah, 100%. What happens when there's lots of rapid change, and the fight, flight, freeze response, and the nervous system starts to fire. So there's a lot of things there, isn't there? Also, that impact everything that you've shared there, Lauren. I mean, there's just a huge amount there. And I was listening to you talk, thinking, yeah, I'd love one of those AI agents. Could just someone just write it for me, get it all sorted, and just give it to me, and I can just plug and go. And I'm sure I'm not the only person out there or leader that probably thinks the same. I'd love to stay with you, because the survey that you just referred to, I think, is fascinating, and maybe also relevant to sort of the next direction that I'd like to take us in this conversation, which is all around the shift in demands on executives and leaders. And you've already sort of started to allude to that as well. We've already mentioned at the beginning of the session, all of us, around the expectations placed on leaders today, going far beyond delivery and performance. So what I'd be quite interested in is, and feel free to bring in anything that's relevant from your survey, what shifts you're seeing in what is sort of meant to be an executive leader now, if we were looking at a sort of a job spec or whatever, and how those expectations are maybe showing up in the coaching conversations that your associate coaches, or even that yourself, are having.
Well, I think what we found in the previous research that we've done is the importance of emotional intelligence as a critical element in that development of our leadership skills, all the way up through the executive ranks. That's one of the critical factors of, like, if you don't have this, you can't get to the next level. So, in some ways, it's like it comes back to basics. Yes, there's all this new technology and all these new expectations out here. And at the same time, when we're not managing agents, we're still managing people. And people work the same as they always have. Because of our genetics and our millions of years of evolution. And so the elements of psychological safety, leading with emotional intelligence, supporting people through change. At the end of the day, what coaching can reinforce is doing more of the right kind of leadership behaviors, and then wrapping that around the new world of AI is what I would suggest.
Lovely, brilliant. Lots to think about there, actually. I'm just sort of like processing that as you speak. And yeah, really, I'd love to come back maybe and speak about that a little bit more. But Jenny, what about from your perspective? Jenny, you're just muted at the moment.
Yeah, I think that leadership used to be about having all of the answers, and now it's about holding the answers, holding the questions that AI can't answer for you. And I think that's a little bit different. So there used to be this, it used to be a burden of expectation. I need to have all the answers. This is a lot of pressure. But now it's, oh, these things AI can't answer. What do I do with them? And that's a pressure as well. I completely agree with the points made about, the fact that actually we have to think about what is happening with AI and be really clear about how we want to use it. And that's a tough question. It might sound really easy. I want to have agents, but actually those agents can go through our whole system. They can expose us in terms of security. They might be taking one person's role. Am I going to redeploy them, or am I going to have less staff? These are a lot of questions. And will they work? And how will people respond to them? And how would it feel like if I'm leading agents as opposed to leading people? Will I still get meaning and fulfillment from my work? So there's quite a lot to explore just in that one point. And I think understanding what uniquely human skills are. Yesterday, I attended the Learning Technologies conference that's on at the moment. There was a study around empathy, and people were given empathy from a doctor and also a chatbot, and they didn't know which was which. And actually, they said that the chatbot was more empathetic. Now, are they more empathetic, or are they better at simulating empathy? And what difference does that make? And I think what we have to consider is not just, can AI do it? Do we want AI to be doing it? That's a different question. Do I want my empathy to come from a simulation, or do I want my empathy to come from a real person who might have had some of my experience? Whether or not they're great at delivering it, maybe not, because we're human and we're imperfect. Do I want perfect empathy all the time, or do I want imperfection but real? And these are some of the things that executives are exploring, I think. And also, should AI do strategy? I studied an MIT AI leadership and strategy program, and they said AI should be tactical. It shouldn't be strategic. But I can guarantee lots of people are using it for strategy right now. And what does that mean? Are we just destined then to repeat what's happened in the past? Because that's what AI is drawing on. It's drawing on our past experiences, only drawing on us and bringing it back together. Or can we actually create something new? So there are big questions and demands on executives. They're grappling with these questions that I'm posing to you right now. But for me, maybe one of the biggest ones is, and I am really seeing this, leaders are asked to be more vulnerable than they've ever been before. A lot of people had a work life and an outside work life. They didn't necessarily combine them. But over the recent years, we've asked for authenticity, openness, vulnerability as a key leadership skill. And that bar has been raised. But is it sustainable for them in this new world? What does that vulnerability mean for them when everything's changing around them? Should they be having a more of a protective layer to enable them to lead? It's a question that I'm really grappling with. What does it mean to be authentic right now in this changing world? And I think that's something leaders really have to consider.
Yeah, love that, love that. And it really fits, Naomi, with what you were saying just now around, nervous system regulation, human to human connection, but also, as director of coaching in your current role, and also being a strategic leader, leading in some very high-powered sort of organizations. I'd love to know what your perspective is on all of this.
Well, other than what I already said, and I agree with both these wonderful ladies, they are nailing it with the unknown uncertainty. But what I would just offer it, the questions are different. the things that we're grappling with are different. But as leaders, it's really about change management. It's about setting the conditions still for our employees to be able to thrive, even under uncertainty. So obviously I was in the military for a very long time, and we're always talking about uncertain environments. It's just that now there's more uncertainty than there was before, and change is speeding up to a rate that we have never seen before. So I think the real challenge as leaders is it's the same challenge, it's just faster and there's more
Right.
input. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like if there's anything that we should do, as an executive should do, it should be to prepare those people, their people, for change management at a faster pace, create safety around those conditions. It's okay to fail. This is what praiseworthy failure looks like. This is what it means to have blameworthy behaviors. And then transparency, and they already said that, being transparent in, hey, we're going to bring this system in. I don't know how to use it as an executive, potentially. A lot of times they won't, because it's moving so fast. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I told you I have OpenClaw and I love it. I love it. I use it. It's my agent. It does the things. You haven't tried it, give it a try. And I did it on purpose so I could be better. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't use it for work. I use it for my personal life. But as an executive, I used to know the things. I used to be the expert, but now you're not going to be the expert. Other people are going to be the expert. You know, they're going to be, to the young people might be the expert. So I think we're seeing the change in executives not knowing everything, and we've already covered that topic. But change management for sure, and the ability to process uncertainty because of change moving so fastly and getting our people prepared for it. I think that's what we need to do, or help our executives get their head wrapped around it. Because I think what's happening is there are the resistors, but I feel like if you are going to resist, your company might not sustain itself. You might not be relevant in a year even, because of how fast it's changing. And maybe the services you're providing now isn't going to be available, or it could be replaced by an agent. You just don't know. So I think we just got to be ready for those changes and get our people ready for those changes. Give them all the time, I say all the time and space, get them a coach to be able to process some of these things, and to be able to be okay being augmented by AI tools.
Yeah, 100%. And when you were saying about it's changed, but it's everything is just faster. You can see that sort of playing out in in all of the coaching conversations that I'm having with organizations and the leaders sort of within them. One of the things that I've experienced, and I'd love to hear your perspective on it, Naomi, is that the leaders that I've certainly worked with are often expected to hold like multiple tensions around performance and well-being and speed and reflection and certainty, and then it's ambiguity, and there's a whole range of things. How do from your experience when you're coaching, how do you experience that coaching itself supports leaders to navigate that level of complexity without becoming overwhelmed, burnt out, and or reactive, if that
Well,
is
I
even
think that's,
possible?
yeah. Well, I think that's the benefit of coaching, is it provides the space that you
Yeah.
might not have when you're inundated with all the things. I think I had someone yesterday even just say, the thing I appreciate the most is that I'm not being inundated in this, 45 minutes to an hour. And
Yeah.
you're holding space for me, and I can be reflective. And I can't necessarily do that on a day-to-day basis when I've got reports coming in 24/7, and maybe I got things going on with my kids, and maybe I am a little bit burnt out. And it goes back to what we do as coaches anyway, is help people align with their values, the things that matter the most to them. Because I think we need to come back to that in some point, because we'll have these identity shifts. We've already started to see it. With the coders that are no longer coders when AI does that better than you. And so it's like, okay, now who are you as a person? Now what do you value? Now what do you prioritize? And being that mirror for someone. And yeah, AI could do it. ChatGPT, number one use case is therapy, they say, right? But
Yeah.
it's not the same when, to Jenny's point earlier, when we were talking earlier, you're always awesome. When, oh, that's a great idea. No, you need someone that's going to challenge you. It's going to help you peel back the layers of you. And we've all probably been, I think about self-limiting beliefs. We've all been challenged with our own self-limiting beliefs. I don't know that AI would get after it the way a human coach would, especially when it comes to looking at, maybe in the future, looking at the nonverbals. Do you know what I mean? How people shut down, or how they light up when they're talking about whatever it is that just brings them joy. And I think that that is our value. That is our value of coaches. And I think that we are better together. And I think that we need to hold on to that connection and that space. And if there's anything, like, let AI do the simple task. Let it free up more time to be human.
Yeah, love that. Love that. And definitely, what you were saying around the, the little nuances that we as experienced coaches would pick up, that the things that are not said, but it's, patterns of behavior or shift in an eye pattern, an eyebrow raise, or just those tiny nuances that, that we know that human to human relationship coaching will definitely will definitely pick up. But fabulous. We're starting to move towards the end of our time together, and I wish we had longer, but there's a couple of extra questions that I'd just like to squeeze in, if possible. And Jenny, I know you do lots of organizational coaching, and you work with lots of corporate clients. When corporate clients invest in coaching today, what are you seeing that they value most?
Such a great question in terms of what they value most. And I think it does vary depending on the organization. Sometimes they're trying to solve an organizational problem, such as we don't have much diversity in the top of the organization. We don't see people getting promoted, and we're looking to move the dial on that. We're looking to move the dial on a pay gap that we have because we're not finding those people in senior roles. So sometimes they're valuing that dial moving. Other times they're looking for coaching to help with well-being and for problem solving, and other times they just want people to know that they are being valued, and we are seeing an increase in people wanting to democratize coaching. So we've got organizations that we work with who are saying, well, everyone can just have one session, but at least everyone gets one session rather than the people at the top getting so much more. So it does vary what people are looking for. Ultimately, though, we are in a difficult time when it comes to the economy in the UK, and people are looking at their bottom line and for a return on investment. And so someone came to me very recently. There's an internal coaching team within an organization, and they decided to scrap them and get AI coaching. And I think that organizations who do things like that are pretty short-sighted, because ultimately it's going to break, and then they're going to have to go back and recruit people again. And we've seen this time and time again with people who have removed people and said they're going to use AI and then realize the shortcomings of AI. And I think it's the thinking things through, whatever reason you want to get coaching or want to remove coaching or want to go in another direction with coaching, don't just look at the first order effect. We're going to save money. Yeah, we might save money, but then when people want someone to speak to, they no longer have that person. Yes, they're going to have an AI potentially to speak to, but can the AI coach deal with the complexity of the kinds of challenges that were being brought, or opportunities that were being brought to coaching in the past? And it's that depth of thinking, as I've been thinking about this as we've been talking, and I think AI can give you speed. Coaching gives you depth, and I think I think that's what they should be looking for. Do some deeper work, some sustainable work that really enables your leaders. So what they ask for and what they should be asking for are not always the same thing, but I encourage them to think a little bit more deeply about this.
Great. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because sometimes they don't know what they don't know. They think that's what they want, but actually, is it what they need? It's that want and need thing, isn't it? Which can be very, very, very different. Laura, from your perspective, what have you seen that you feel, if you're looking sort of at trends, let's go ahead maybe 12, 18 months, the landscape is likely to evolve again. But what do you believe that corporate coaching clients will value most going forward, if we can sort of look at what they're seeing now? But what do you believe the trend will sort of take us towards?
Well, I had a conversation with a CHRO not too long ago who used the term transformation is getting transformed. And so we are just in constant transformation. It used to be that you did a company would do a big change effort, every few years or every 5 years. And okay, now we've got a new technology. But now every day is change. And we need to continue to guide our people in understanding uh, how they can be successful in an ever evolving world. What I see over the next year to 24 months is that we're going to continue to accelerate the pace of change. There could be a further bifurcation of people who are on board and those who are left behind. And so I think it's a real leadership challenge to figure out, how do we address some of the skills gaps that we have? How do we figure out how work gets done over the next few years? And what are the roles that we really need to continue to have human effort in, and human judgment and insight? And so the leaders are going to need to be grappling with these really meaty and important questions. And those are the kinds of things that I would say are the perfect areas for humans to be grappling with. Again, probably with some reference from AI as well. Managing the pace of change and what's going to be happening with the workforce for the sake, and how do we honestly work with our governments as well? How do senior leaders in organizations help to influence policy around these things? Because that's one of the things that over the years, as you look at the internet and social media, for example, here we are 20 years into the internet, and yet our governmental policies are still not up to date to manage some of the challenges. This is going to be a major challenge over the next decade relating to AI and how we continue to support our society. So I'm getting a little deeper there than just coaching and AI, but it's something that I think about a lot as we look at our workforce transitions.
Yeah, totally relevant, and so glad that you actually brought that up, because I think it's an important part of the conversation. Finally, I want to come back and finish with you, if that's okay, Naomi, because we spoke a lot about AI, performance, shifting expectations, and you've mentioned yourself a lot about sort of change, accelerating and sort of getting faster and faster. In your opinion and experience, if everything continues to accelerate, particularly at the rate that we're seeing at the moment, what do you believe or feel is the one thing that leaders will need more of, not less of, but they would need more of, that perhaps organizations might be underestimating?
Wait, I mean, I work for Arbinger. Okay, so I have to say we have to see the humanity in others. When
Yeah,
when AI is a tool and everybody's used to the tool, I mean, because we like to say we want to treat people as people, meaning not a vehicle to be used, not an obstacle to blame, not in irrelevancies like they don't matter. I think our work more than ever is going to be vitally important so people can feel they're valued,
yeah,
especially if an AI tool can do the job better than they can, or when they're losing their sense of purpose and sense of identity because like they don't have a job potentially. We think writ large. Lauren was going deep, and I agree with her though, because the question I ask myself is, what kind of will my kids go to college? What kind of work will they be doing?
yeah.
But that's not in 10 years when my kids go to college. That is in the next couple of years. And so I think we really got to see the humanity in others, see their challenges, what they're going to be going through, and especially if we're CEOs and leaders, we really got to be tuned into that. And I think that is the number one thing, if you were to ask me, that we should be thinking about.
Yeah, love that. Which brings us back full circle to that human to human connection, which is something that we all, I think, are in alignment of the fact that AI isn't able to replace yet, hopefully ever. But thank you. As I knew, there has been a real depth to this conversation that I think it's taken us to places that perhaps we would have loved to have spent a little bit more time unpicking even more. But what really stands out for me is that whilst the context of leadership is evolving, particularly with AI, and that increasing complexity and shift in expectation, the core of what leaders need still remains deeply human. Clarity in how they speak, how they think, I should say, and confidence in how they show up, their identity, how they see themselves, and the ability to create those environments where others can also perform at their best as well. And I think we're all in agreement that coaching plays a really important role where that's concerned. Thank you, Jenny, Naomi, and Lauren, for sharing your fantastic insights and perspectives so openly. And thank you, everybody, for joining us in this particular conversation, which is shared across the Delenta community and partner networks. It's been a real pleasure to host this conversation. I wish that we had longer, but we are already out of time. But thank you so much for everyone joining us. And thank you again, ladies. I look forward to our continued connection.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's been fabulous.